Hey guys, welcome back to the Rants. Another day, another rant. Today, C-Kites. What happened to them? Are they really dangerous? Who are they for? Can anyone ride a C-Kite? So many questions that need to be answered. Like all these rants, I guess we start at the beginning. What is a C-Kite? Is there actually something that defines what a C-Kite is, more than just its C-looking shape? I think there's a lot of kites that fall into some kind of C category. So just people labeling C-Kites as dangerous or C-Kites not good for beginners doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, because the definition of a C-Kite is really broad. If we go back to the beginning, you'll find that the only kites that really existed in the beginning were kites that we would label now as C-Kites. All kites had direct connection. Bridles didn't exist till around 2007 or 8 when Best brought out the Waroo. And previous to that, there were only C-Kites. I think this is part of the reason why C-Kites got such a bad name. Those old kites, no matter what kind of kites they just weren't designed very well. And since they weren't designed that well, they were quite dangerous. People got into situations where they fucked up and smashed into a fence or a wall, or got lofted, or something else happened. And I don't think that was the fault of C-Kites per se. That was just the fault of crappy kites in general. They weren't designed well, they didn't have all the technology they had now, and they didn't have the know-how that they had now from many years of experience building kites to make a kite that worked well. So just the fact that it was an old kite, I think, is the reason why they were so dangerous. When bridal kites came onto the scene in around 2007 or 2008, Best brought out the Waroo, and that really revolutionized things, because beginners were now able to pick up a kite that had a lot more D-power, and thus was a lot safer, because they could get out of sticky situations that they put themselves into. They could let go of the bar, have some, decent amount of D-power, and feel safe. Bridal kites changed the landscape of kiteboarding. They definitely made it easier for people to get started into the sport, and they made it far simpler for someone to teach a person how to kiteboard, because they could now just sheet out and turn the power on and off more or less as they wanted to. The birth of bridal kites and this whole new wave of depowerable kites really brought a new issue for C-Kites though. C-Kites being the older design and typically known as having no D-power, brands and shops and just people selling and riding equipment started to push this narrative that all C-Kites are really dangerous. You don't want a C-Kite because that's an old type of kite. You want to upgrade to a new bridal type of kite that has a lot of D-power, and that's safe. C-Kites are dangerous. You don't want a C-Kite. That's the narrative that brands and the shops and everything were just pushing so hard that it made people assume that, you can't ride a C-Kite. That's dangerous. That's old school. Like, if you're riding a C-Kite, you're a liability. Now, whilst this is true for some old C-Kites, I do believe they were actually pretty dangerous compared to bridal kites. They still weren't so dangerous that you couldn't ride them. I mean, we all rode them for years and nothing ever happened to me. Nothing ever happened to lots of people I know. Nothing ever happened to people that were actually good at managing their risk and assessing the conditions, assessing their situation, and making the right choices, making a logical choice on what gear to take, when to ride, what to do. It was the people that really stepped out of their comfort zone or just took stupid risks that ended up getting injured with C-Kites, and I still believe they're the people that end up getting injured most often nowadays as well. Having a kite that depowers 100% or however much it depowers won't stop you from making a silly choice in equipment or a silly choice in what conditions you ride in, and it won't stop the user also making a bad input, because really that's how most people end up getting injured. It's a rider error. The rider makes a bad choice on what to do with the kite at a certain time, and they end up in a bad situation. C-Kite or not, that wouldn't be changed. One thing I really think needs addressing that no one's talking about is what purpose does a bridle serve? A bridle serves the same purpose that a fifth line serves. It's to support the leading edge. And if you look at the physics of how a bridle works, it's pretty clear that a bridle actually does a worse job of supporting the leading edge than a fifth line. A fifth line is one single line that goes all the way to pretty much the center of the leading edge and supports it on its own, whereas a bridle is coming from the middle two lines and the load is dispersed, but there's still flex and play within the bridle and within the center of the kite, because the center of the kite isn't attached firmly to one line that runs all the way down to the bar. A bridle was made to do the job of a fifth line without needing to use a fifth line. I think the stigma involved with fifth lines just didn't help the whole C-Kite or direct connected kite situation either, because people always had this idea like, oh, my fifth line is going to tangle. If I'm in the surf, it's going to wrap around my kite and it's going to rip my kite in half. And this is just complete crap. I mean, I've been riding 21 years now. I've been riding fifth line for almost that entire time. I have never once had that happen. I ride in the surf more than anyone. I drop my kite probably as much or more than anyone. I'm trying stuff all the time. My kite gets washed by waves all the time. I have just never had this happen. Unfortunately, this stigma against C-Kites and this narrative that everyone was pushing that C-Kites are so dangerous and so hard to ride, I think it really stifled progression in the sport. Back in the day when there was only C-Kites and there was only this harder type of kite to ride that was easier to learn tricks on, progression was a lot higher in general. Like the general ability of your rider at your local beach was a lot higher overall. People learnt tricks a lot quicker. People getting into the sport just were at a higher level in a lot quicker time because they had to learn a much bigger set of skills to ride that type of kite. And naturally, if you develop a bigger set of skills while learning, you're more keen to push your own level because you feel more confident in your riding. I think this is something that's really started to take over in kiteboarding, is people learning on equipment that's very easy to ride, very easy to start on, but is quite difficult for them to actually learn tricks on, and they don't realize it. Brands aren't telling them this, shops aren't telling them this, people at the beach who can ride usually don't care to tell them this, and most of them wouldn't listen anyway. You tell them, hey, this gear isn't easy to learn tricks on. The bridles are taking out the response, they're taking out the feedback from the kite, and it's harder to tell where the kite is in the air whilst doing tricks. People don't want to hear this, or they don't want to believe this. I don't know which it is, but it's the simple truth. Bridle kites aren't that easy to learn some tricks on, and it's the reason you will see 95% of all the best riding in the world, freestyle wise, done on C-Kites and fifth line kites. Yes, there's people that can ride bridle kites and ride them really well. There's the Brandon Shides, there's the Yuri Zuns, there's the Carlos Marios of the world. But you need to question yourself in this case. Do you look like Brandon Shide? Do you look like Yuri Zun? Do you look like Carlos Mario? And I'm gonna say 99.9% of people, no, you're not built like them. I'm not built like them. I can't ride those kites like them for a reason. And I would say that in general, I'm a pretty strong, big, fit guy. It takes a lot of strength and a lot of commitment to ride a bridle kite that pulls super hard and to do technical tricks with those kites. You need to overcome the power of those kites and really force those tricks through. And if you look at those guys that I mentioned, if you look at their riding, that's how their riding comes across to me. That's how they look. They don't look like they're finessing anything. They look like they're just powering through what they can. And I mean, that's a certain style. That's definitely, like, I do appreciate Brandon Shide's riding, Yuri Zun's riding, Bebe's riding. They're amazing riders and some of the stuff they've done is insane. But you need to realize that for the average person, that's not a reality. you're just never going to achieve that level because you're not swole like those guys are. And I think that's something that really gets the point across, that C-Kites are easier to use and are easier for people to ride and learn tricks on in general, is when we look at women's riding. Women, we know this, women for the most part are not as strong as men. That's just a fact. And if we look at the best women riders over the course of kiteboarding history, all the best riding has been done on C-Kite. None of it has been done on a bridal kite. And there's a reason for that. C-Kites let you execute things with technicality more in mind. It's more a technical approach. If you do the trick in the way you need to do it, it's gonna work. You don't simply just have to muscle the trick through like you would on a bridal kite. Now, of course, there's some women that do ride a bridal kite and they do make it work. But if we're to look at what is really the best riding that's been done by women in the freestyle scene, it's all been done on C-Kites and fifth line kites. And I know even from talking to those women that are the best riders, they all prefer to ride that kite because they say it's easier to do tricks on. So I don't even think that's up for question. So what's the answer to this? What am I really ranting about here? Why have C-Kites become so obsolete? Using these old designs and just simply rehashing them every year with a different graphic, I don't think's helping anyone, and it's not selling C-Kites. When the rest of the kites in the line are built with new technology and new ways to do things in mind, it just looks silly to have a C-Kite that's a 10-year-old design in the same lineup with it. And it's not surprising then that no one wants to buy it. If it's simply the same thing and no one's done any marketing to tell you otherwise, why would you buy that 10-year-old design over a brand new kite? Like, that's the point of it all here. You're making a C-Kite that's 10 years old and doing nothing to sell it to people. Of course that fucking thing isn't gonna sell. No fucking idiot would buy that kite. Obviously I'm biased here to Ozone a bit, but I think with the amp, that's something we did. We made a new C-Kite design, something that's relevant, something that actually works and has D-power like a new kite, but it's still a C-Kite. You still have C-Kite feel, C-Kite feedback, and it's far easier to do tricks on that kite than it is on other kites. I don't feel like that kite was marketed particularly well. I think it could have been marketed far better. People could be told, hey, this is the kite that you can do stuff easily on. We could have pushed it more with women riding that kite and showing, hey, look, I can do tricks on this kite really easily. But you know, that's not up to me. That's not my decision, what marketing Ozone does to promote the kite. And in the end, it kind of got the same angle pushed as any other C-Kite does, which is, hey, hardcore, you do some jumps and loops on this thing, it's the sickest. But no one was told, hey, we've updated and upgraded this thing, it's a new type of C-Kite, it's not like C-Kites you've had before. We really need to change this mentality around C-Kites. I don't know how it's possible without getting to the brands, without affecting them first and making them understand that this is some kind of problem. They're not going to change. But if everyone talks about this thing enough, if people speak about how, you know, you ride a direct connected kite like a C-Kite, it's going to be easier to learn tricks on. If people talk about this enough, things will change. But if everyone just goes along with whatever anyone else is saying, whatever their shop's saying, whatever their brand's saying, they just give in and ride whatever crap they're telling them to ride, nothing will change and things will only get worse. They will stop making C-Kites. They will stop making kites that even perform well for freestyle. It will all just be focused on beginner, intermediate sector, and that will be the end of it forever. Tell people about C-Kites. Tell people why they would want to ride one. Try to motivate your brand to build a new one, build a better one, upgrade what they're doing. Just do something. If no one's doing anything, nothing can change. And not many people are doing a lot right now, so do something. I'm sure there's going to be the people that have got through this rant enough to just say, who cares? Whatever, man. Why are you so worried about this stuff? And to those people I say, that's cool, man. You don't have to be worried about anything. But if you're passionate about something and you want to see something progress and you want to see the top level reached by the most amount of people, you should care about this kind of stuff. Like, that's just natural to care about this kind of stuff. I care about this kind of stuff. Whether you care about this stuff, that's up to you. I'm not telling everyone to care about this stuff. I'm just trying to give people some motivation to do something about the situation and maybe think about it a little and help educate some other people. Think about things, think about how stuff works. It's cool to think about stuff. It's cool to talk about stuff. Let's make that a bit more normal. Rant over. Tune in next time for the next rant, or don't.